Welcome to my podcast. And I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. And I've invited John, our castle manager, much esteemed castle manager, to join me in the saloon to perhaps walk through a few rooms so we can think about what the journey has been over the last 15 to 20 years. So, John, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope we're increasing our step counts a little bit.
Talking of step counts, the one thing where it hasn't really worked for me at Highclere is I seem to walk increasing distances over the years and just get larger. And I don't think that's meant to be the case. I thought being on the second floor of a building of this stature where you can only...
First floor, aren't you?
Well, it depends where you start.
Well, if you start on the ground floor, you're up one floor.
I come in on the basement, but anyway, let's not worry about that. Anyway, when one's office is up several...
Flights of stairs.
Yes. What warrants a flight of stairs? Anyway, when one's office is up several flights of stairs, I would hope that I would become step fit. My physique would suggest otherwise.
But you do walk an awful lot of steps, which I do know. And I suppose you probably couldn't get into the suit you first came to the first interview in, which was obviously very smart. And I'm so honestly amazed and grateful that you joined us, because you joined us at a time of terrible rain. And the first few events were filled with rain and the challenges that brings, and mud and goodness knows what. And I hope followed by a little bit of sunshine. And we have had one of the wettest springs and last autumns, which has really given us a huge number of challenges until now, when at last we had a little bit of sunshine.
Yes, the sunshine is very welcome, and you're quite right. There is some significant synergy between my first spring at Highclere and the spring we've just been through, because within, I think, a number of days of me starting, there was a concert being hosted at Highclere, and then we went straight from the concert into what in those days was the game fair, but is now the Highclere show, and it was terribly wet, and we had an awful lot of challenges getting people in and out in the mud. All of which was played out again this Easter, when we opened to the public as we would normally at Easter, and we quite simply couldn't use the car parks that we would normally use, and had to think outside the box and get people in and to the castle and back out safely, which fortunately, because of the team effort this year, we managed to do. But we've actually hosted an event last Friday, bearing in mind we are now at the end of June, and that is the first time we have parked cars without issue on our normal grass car parks this year, which is quite extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? And I hope the summer deals us some slightly kinder cards this year. But it is extraordinary, John, when I look around the castle and the saloon. You know, when you first came here, the rug on the floor was somewhat worn and needed replacing, and we've obviously replaced that. It's a beautiful rug, which is the background for the entrance scenes of not just our events, but also of Downton Abbey. Everything looks polished and together, and indeed it is. And over the years, we have worked our way round through so much of, if you like, the investment deficit, which has been suffered by this house, like many other stately homes in the previous 100 years, really, which were either side of the First and Second World Wars. So I'm really proud of what we've all done.
I think, yes, you need a house to be successful, and certainly these houses that stand alone and are in private ownership, as Highclere is, to be successful at whatever path they choose in business, to generate funds which aren't squirreled off in fast cars and luxurious holidays. They are absorbed many-fold over what is produced back into the building. And as you say, these houses, as they've been in long-term ownership in the same families through multiple wars, they understandably, the custodians at that time didn't invest in the buildings. The buildings are now crying out for catch-up investment. And I think an awful lot has been done at Highclere over the last 19, 20 years in investing back in the property and bringing into play, so to speak, areas that simply weren't in play when I first came. I mean, the third floor at Highclere, I hope we can agree on which floor that is. When I first came, there was no electricity up there. And I remember the first fire risk inspection I had, they weren't so bothered because there wasn't electricity up there, which is one of the biggest risks in a building. And you have not only put electricity up there, modern electricity, but have started to improve a significant number of the rooms. And that's what buildings like this need. They need a constant flow of imagination and love and upkeep. But it doesn't come for free. The energies and the ideas come from people, but you need the wherewithal from the business model and the money.
So, John, why did we go to the Red Stairs? Because that was one of my first projects when you first arrived here.
You're quite right, it was.
So we've walked through, and as John says, it's called the Red Staircase because the carpet's... What colour, John?
That'll be red.
And it's got some stairs on it.
Stairs, no, yes, quite right. Imaginatively named. This is exactly the first project that you undertook when I arrived, and anyone without a bungalow has some form of stairs in their house. But to decorate them here, you had to put up a rather serious scaffold tower because it was the ceiling. Particularly, I remember when I arrived, was
terribly unloved.
Very, very dark. Many years of grime, no doubt, and tales it could tell. And all the pictures came off. And
do you remember taking that huge picture of William Herbert down? That was.
I don't remember it coming down. I remember trying to put it back up with several of us hanging off the scaffold tower to hang it back where it needed to be. And that's another thing with these. You start with an idea, right, we need to decorate the red stairs.
I don't think I'd entirely shared it with my husband as usual.
And he probably hasn't noticed it's been done anyway.
and I remember Richard Morris, who is our amazing agent, and he said, "Why are you doing this, Lady Carnarvon?" And I said, "Because I think it's part of the heart of the house, so we're doing it." And
it is the most beautiful staircase, and I don't remember it striking me as a beautiful staircase prior to you doing it, but it's certainly, it's 19, 20 years on now, but it still glows with a freshness that it didn't have prior to that, and it is the most beautiful staircase that goes up 3 floors.
I mean, funny enough, choosing the colour for the walls here is always... Because I could only choose it once, because to put the scaffolding back up again would have irked my husband. And it's a huge area, so that was quite a challenge with the help of Sarah Morris and her team. And I remember what really did challenge me was the colour of the steps, which you probably don't even notice. But I was painting either side of the red carpet. And those fun little details, I think I had about 17 colours to try and work out what colour actually worked. And I then rehung all the paintings, and we've had another go at some of that as well, which is always a amusing challenge, isn't it? Because it's always a much bigger job than I allow time for.
Yes, and they're not particularly easy paintings to hang. The other key that you have to factor in when you're decorating somewhere, you're in a building of this type, you're not able to decorate the whole of the ground floor. So by definition, you decorate areas, but you've got to decorate them in a manner that ties in with the areas around them. Yeah. Whereas where I live at home, should I choose, I could decorate the whole of the ground floor. You simply couldn't do that in a building of this nature. And each room and each area is very different in its style and its characteristics. So they've all got to complement each other when you take a bite-sized chunk to decorate or refurbish or clean or rehang the paintings, and they've all got to complement each other.
One of my funniest afternoons and evenings was, do you remember when my husband bought the Aubusson tapestry which is now hanging up there. And he'd bought it, and the size in the brochure was spec'd wrong. So we thought he'd bought a much smaller tapestry than he'd bought. And when he went to collect it, it didn't fit in his car, so he had to come back again and send a van. And then when it came back here, John, do you remember we just walked round and round trying to find a wall we could put it on, because my proposed wall was not nearly big enough. It was luckily very light, so we had one end each. And we must have spent about half an hour arguing about, your suggestion was that my husband should go and find a bigger castle, which was one way out.
Not always helpful, but it is on the wall outside my office, and it is actually rippling as we talk, because the window is open as it's a relatively warm day, and it has very definitely taken on a life of its own. But it does complement that area very well, and I think the painting up here was moved from there, so you've kept the paintings it displaced still in situ in
the same sort of
the hall and stairs that they were in.
But that was really most amusing. Anyway, I still cry with laughter when we think about it.
I've got a question for you, Lady Canon. Do you feel or think you will ever get to the end of the works that you have in mind you would like to do, or is it a Severn Bridge, you just get as far as you can and start again and get as far as you can?
You clearly went to Bristol, because you mentioned the Severn Bridge, and I went to St Andrews, so I'd mentioned the Forth-Row Bridge. But anyway, that's the first thing.
Let's split hairs and hope there's a fifth or sixth bridge somewhere.
I don't know, John, because I didn't actually think I would begin to do any restoration work within the tower. And I stood there with Pat Withers, actually, who was painted here from some, I don't know, probably 64, 65 years, contemplating what we were bringing back to life again. And I think I just cried. She did too, because it is amazing what we've all done. It has been a huge team effort. I think part of my light bulb moment was reusing some of what would have been bedrooms on the third floor, if we call it that, and theming them around stories and themes from the history of this place, because then it begins to give them a life. So there's the antiquities room, there's the gardens and maps room. I'm just about to do a Wyoming room for my ma-in-law. Well, I've been doing it. Everything takes a lot longer than you ever think here. And that then has given me huge pleasure, because it's doable within a budget. And if you find a raison d'etre for somewhere, then there's hope it may yet survive for the future. So it's understanding what the raison d'etre for this is. And when Geordie and I were waking up thinking in the middle of the night with a cup of tea at 4 o'clock in the morning, what are we going to do and how are we going to make this custodianship, stewardship work, I was always thinking, my thought was, how can we make people love it? Because you need the love and the passion, not just from yourself, but from other people to care. And I think over the last 15 years perhaps, that really has come to the fore, and the small steps we all take to share our passion, our love and our care and our stewardship then becomes appreciated increasingly by other people, so that all we do here has more meaning, I think, for us who are working for the however many hours it is and doing 16,000 steps a day. I don't know how you feel, but...
Well, I think one of the things that is often said of Highclere is that it does feel lived in and it does feel like at home. An element of that is, whilst it is a significantly sized building, no rooms in it are huge. So you can genuinely see a family of a certain size living in it and filling it with noise and laughter and love and warmth. And ironically, I mentioned warmth, unless it's been a bitterly cold winter and the wind has blown for quite some time from the northeast, it is rare that you walk into this castle in the morning and think, oh, heaven, there is a chill in here. And it has only got sort of complementary background heating, but it is an amazingly warm building. The other thing is there are pictures around here of your family and children and friends and an extended family. And that makes it lived in, because they are current pictures. That Highclere hasn't had a knife split through it, and what is presented to the visitors is a date in time from which it hasn't changed. Highclere has developed and changed as it has gone on through your and Lord Carnarvon's custodianship, and I think that's where people get a genuine sense of it is a family home, and people are seeing a family home that is lived in today. Also, they can bump into people that are in the photographs that they walk round and see. I also think what helps is the staff that work at Highclere looking after the public when they come. Also, on the occasions when you have your private family home times, are the same staff that are around and help on those occasions, so that there isn't a changing of the guard. It is the same people. And the staff know and have stories and tales about the castle as much as the family and the history do. And those histories are not to be divorced. They run concurrently. The family heritage of the building is one thing, but there is a staff heritage that runs with it. Now, that staff heritage has changed as the staffing of these buildings has changed over the years, and the purpose of this building has changed. It now welcomes a significant number of visitors. We run a significant number of events. It is no surprise to anyone that a television programme that started out 15 years ago as Downton Abbey has run for 15 years using Highclere as the frame against which everything is set in the programmes and the two subsequent films. And that all goes to make a very rich tapestry of history and makes it believable and warm when people come. And everybody comes with their own snippet of knowledge about Highclere, whether it's about the family, whether they were associated as a member of staff here, whether they only know it through a medium of television. And it's not just Downton, it's Jeeves and Wooster, it's the Legend of Tarzan, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Eyes Wide Shut, I've mentioned The Secret Garden. There was a Bollywood film, which name continually escapes me. Pop videos, you've had musicians here. Yes, I mean, that was an extraordinary day. And all that goes into making a really rich, warm heritage that draws different people in for different reasons. And they don't necessarily, when they see John Legend's music video, immediately see it as Highclere, but those that follow John Legend closely have that knowledge behind that. It has been an amazing journey, and someone else at some stage will take it on, and there'll be another chapter and another hopeful business venture or event that is hosted here. I mean, this year you hosted the 20th annual event of a charity that has been, I mean, charities going anywhere for 20 years for fundraising is quite astonishing. And to have got to 20 years, actually in the running, it was longer than 20 years because we had COVID in the middle when the event couldn't take place. But that's an extraordinary feat. And I bump into people all the time away from work that say, where do you work? And I say, oh golly, I got married there, or my friends got married there, or I went to a wedding there. Highclere is known worldwide for many different reasons. My middle son has recently been working in Australia and sent a rather grumpy teenage message saying, I went all this way to get away from you and mother, and one of the television programmes about behind the scenes and the staff at Highclere was on it, and he sent me a photograph of, ironically, himself when he was working here in one of the tea room outlets, and his father, who appeared in his sitting room in Australia. So it is extraordinary how Highclere does entwine with many different people's lives and how far it stretches. But as it did 100 years ago with the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, that story rippled around the world, very much more slowly than things do today, because it was by telegram or newspaper, and newspapers travelled by boat, so it took longer. But nevertheless, that draw of Highclere, or that impact of Highclere, has been around for a very long time.
It has been amazing, and I was very lucky to start to write in whenever it's 2011, and that really made me focus on storytelling. And I think we're just telling stories here, hopefully not telling tall tales, but just sharing stories of how we've all lived here from 1300 years ago to today, the little details that draw us all together. And I think I'm always trying to find, as you know, common threads in quite a fragile and broken world today, of the positivity that a house like Highclere can visibly give people. A day out, time out, some happy moments and happy thoughts. And I'm always very conscious when people visit that we are helping them find those happy moments, and we sort of have a responsibility to make sure they have the best day out they possibly can.
Well, it is a hugely rich heritage and diverse at Highclere, and it does allow people escapism. We are incredibly fortunate that more recently the window into Highclere was provided by the vehicle that is Downton Abbey, which brought Highclere to the attention of a populace.
Of an international world, above all.
Very much so. But there is a sense of escapism. There is a sense of walking on the lawns and viewing the views that have been viewed for many, many years by many, many visitors, whether private to the family or, what's this year, the 27th year the castle's been open to the public or something, approaching 30 probably. And over that time, a huge number of visitors have come to Highclere. And we're very fortunate at the moment that people still appear to want to come and visit. And whenever I welcome a group of visitors, as I did this morning, and as I will do again shortly, I am at pains, and I mean it sincerely, to thank people for coming, because you can't take visitors for granted, and it's the visitors that enable you to paint the red stairs, to invest your time and energies and thoughts in improving the rooms on the third floor, not changing them, just decorating them.
The bedrooms on the first floor were terrible. I mean, we've done a huge amount. It is a team effort. It's Louis who sings and dances and gives people such amusing anecdotes in the tea rooms, to, you know, Jason in housekeeping, and then the farm and the gardens. It is a whole team effort, and I always feel it's not just my castle or Geordie's castle, perhaps it is his castle actually, but it's also your castle and Jason's castle and everyone's castle, and I hugely appreciate everything everyone does, and I love working as a team. It'd be miserable to be here on my own, utterly miserable. But one question for you, John. So I remember very clearly when you came for your interview, however many years ago it was, and sitting in my study, which was actually slightly tidier, probably a lot tidier than it is today, when you can hardly open the door, to be honest. And you were sitting there with your pad and your papers and your pen or pencils, looking very smart. You were one of the youngest ever clerks of the course in the country, running a race course. And you had very kindly applied to the job. Are you still happy you did apply for the job and came south?
Very much so. I was successful in being chosen to work at Highclere and fill the role that was advertised. And I have never looked back on it. I think you get a sense in a relatively short period of time if something is going to work for you. But before that, given I was moving a wife and a very small family 230 miles, I needed to be sure that was a sensible step to take. And I have no doubt, what you may not know is it was only shortly after I started that I received 2 phone calls. One asking me if I would go back into racing, and I said that's very kind, but I had just moved my family 230 miles and I'd started a new job, and I thought it would be unfair on not only the people I'd started working for, but myself, that I didn't give it a chance to work. And so thank them very much, and that didn't go very far at all. And I received another phone call to move into London to work for quite a prominent family in the running of one of their households. And again, I said no, I wasn't interested in that. So that was a little while after. I'd been here a little while for that. And since then, the phone's never rung.
Good. Well, I'm very happy.
But that was two. While you asked the question, that was on two occasions in my time at Highclere when that question was very seriously asked of me, and I was happy where I was. I think there comes a time, and it'll be more for you and Lord Carnarvon, when, or possibly the next generation, when change is good for a business, and it's time to go off and do something else and let new people come in with new ideas. But somewhere like Highclere, I think you don't necessarily have to make the change overnight. Change can be slow and gradual, but Highclere needs to find its place going forward for the next 100 years in whatever enables it to continue to thrive and remain in private ownership, which is the key, I think.
It is. I think what's interesting, John, is I think travelling through, Brexit and COVID, two huge challenges to us on different fronts, we couldn't all have made it through without the experience of yourself and mine and my husband and the years we had actually worked here. I'm not sure we just about have made it through. So experience and a steady team is invaluable. And I feel that as we're travelling for the next bit with ideas and developments that will come out of the journey for the last 15 years, again, the experience we've had will allow us to build and take the steps which don't come overnight otherwise. So I think I was reading, or I heard on somewhere, probably like Radio 4, that people become most useful, most successful, economically successful and successful in business from the age of 60. So for the next 15 years, that's when actually much of what you've gained in the past comes forward to be in amongst the person that you are, which I thought was quite interesting.
I think definitely if you've been somewhere for a period of time, your experiences help colour or help you formulate your thoughts going forward, because experience is key. And I think I do overthink things quite often, and I am someone that thinks a lot around challenges and problems, but I think that a lot of that comes from experience, because you know the pitfalls you're trying to avoid. When you're youthful and naive, you don't even know the potholes are in the road, so you just go on glibly with your blinkered vision and tumble in a few and get yourself up and keep going. I think age and experience does afford you the wherewithal to know that this path has potholes in it, therefore I'm not going to run ahead quite as naively as perhaps I once did. Who knows?
Exactly, who knows? Because we have to live each day and learn from the past and see what excitements the future holds for us. And clearly from your earlier comments that you'd really like to have a very nice pub here, John.
Well, Louis does have his cocktail bar, where I must admit, after long days, more obviously in the summer, the team, whilst fatigued on foot, have retired for a light libation, which is a very good way to end any day, I think. And you're with work colleagues who've grabbed on the rope and pulled in the same direction, and very, very often yourself and Lord Carnarvon are there, and we'll all have a drink together.
I'm there trying one of Louis' new cocktails, and my husband comes round the corner wondering where we all are, catching us out.
Catches us all, drinking at his expense.
But he's usually tempted with a Lord Carnarvon's Highclere Castle gin cocktail, and then he's happy. Thank you, John, so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Here's to the next
20 years.
Good heavens.
Why not join me to enjoy a plethora of fascinating topics, guests and friends from the world of Highclere Castle, the real Downton Abbey. Whether you love movies or care about the planet, wish to discover the best gardening or cooking tips, hear about innovation, music, or the history of flight. I hope you will thoroughly enjoy the library we have created on my podcast page at ladycarnarvon.com.